Hello and welcome to a new video in which I will talk about boot scrapers. I'm dedicating this video to my sister and two friends, and they will know why. Boot scrapers are something that most of you will have seen in the streetscape in Ireland, mostly urban, I would think. From the little research that I have done on the topic, to be honest, I would think that most of them are Georgian in date, some may be Victorian, or some people might put them outside their doors because they're fancy. But I think the origin is most likely Georgian. They're mostly cast iron, and they can be fairly simple in their shape, or they can be fairly elaborate. And the older they are and the more often they are being used, or they have been used, you will see that some of the metal has worn off, just like with other things that are made of metal and that people walk on or that use or touch. I walked around Kilkenny today and photographed some of them, and I've uploaded the images to Wikicommons as usual. And I've mapped them, of course. I have been wanting to map them for a while, but I couldn't really figure out how to do it, because I thought that if you just map them as a node, they're too vulnerable, they're too easy to move around on the map accidentally, and then they're not connected to the door that they belong to. So I decided to add a new key to the entrance, the node that marks the entrance into a building. And because sometimes there is not just one boot scraper at a door, but two on either side, or sometimes it's even more complicated than that, I decided to use the key boot scraper with an underscore and then left, right, or both, just like we do with sidewalks, for example. So you could say that the boot scraper is on the left-hand side of the door or on the right-hand side, and that's always going into the door. And then I noticed after a while that a lot of the doors into Georgian houses have an extra step. So while going through the door, you have to go up one step. And I thought that's a bit difficult for people that have mobility issues or people in wheelchairs. So I decided to add the step count to the entrance as well. And it can be more than one. The way I did it is that if there's a flight of steps leading into the door, I added the step count accordingly. But if there is the one step that you have to step up into the door, but before that there's a kind of a platform, and then there are steps before that, I wouldn't count those, and I mapped those as steps extra. This has nothing to do with the boot scrapers, but for visually impaired people, I thought it would be important to know how many steps there are and where they are, and if you have to step up going through a door or not. Which is not, as I said, it's not part of the boot scraper missions, so to speak. But while I was mapping all the entrances, I thought I might as well add them while I was doing that, so I don't have to go back to every single door in Kilkenny again and add that information at a later stage. I had hoped to use EveryDoor because the nodes, when you map nodes on EveryDoor, they automatically snap to the line that you want them on. Like, for example, if you're mapping a highway crossing and you map it as a node, as you do, it automatically snaps the node onto the line that is the road or the highway. OSMAnd doesn't do that, but I tried to find a way to map the entrance or a door on every door, and it doesn't work, ironically. So I had to use OSMAnd, and that meant that I ended up with all these freestanding nodes that I had to go into a browser-based editor then and snap them onto the building. This is an extra step you have to do. Otherwise, you have all these freestanding nodes and they're a bit too vulnerable. In OSMAnd, you zoom in on where the door is supposed to go or the entrance, add the node, and then add the 2 or 3 tags that you need for the entrance tag, the boot scraper tag, and then, if it applies, also the step count. If there is at least one step, you might as well also add wheelchair equals no, because it's not wheelchair accessible then. Number 5 William Street has boot scrapers on either side of the entrance, so I use boot_scraper equals both. Because I had to use OSMAnd for mapping the entrances and with them the boot scrapers, the nodes are all now free floating. They're not attached to the buildings, so I have to go in now with the idea editor or JOSM or whatever editor you prefer and snap them onto the building. I will use the idea editor because I always do that in my tutorials. Logged in with my username and click on edit. And I've zoomed in on William Street. I did the survey in quite a few other streets as well, but I think I have dealt with those already, because you don't have to watch me add 31 nodes to buildings. So there was one that I think I already snapped onto the building earlier. So this is what it should look like. It has this node and it has the entrance symbol. And if I click on this one, I presume this is the next one. Yeah, it has the entrance yes, step count 2, and boot scraper left. That's the one that you saw me map earlier. So all I have to do now is drag this over here and let it go, and then it looks like this. It's grey. I think that's because, yeah, this is entrance equals main, so they are white, and if it's entrance equals yes, they are grey. Sometimes it was a bit difficult to decide, do I use shop or main or whatever. So sometimes I just used entrance yes. And then if we move on here, this was number 4 William Street. This is number 5 William Street. I've already snapped that onto the building because I actually had a duplicate. The entrance was already mapped when I added it with OSMAnd. And so I had a free floating node there and I just merged them into the one. And then going along here, 6 and 7, I already snapped those as well. And then we have I think this is number 9. Yeah, number 9 William Street. A lot of the buildings on William Street are on the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage because so many of them are Georgian. So this one is, for example, and it was in the center of the building. So if you highlight the building, now you wouldn't know what the center was of this wall here, but if you highlight the building, you get this little arrow that marks the middle of the building, so you can just snap it onto there roughly. Again, this is white because it's entrance main. And then number 10 William Street is this one here, and it wasn't quite in the center, so I just snap it onto here. Fun fact, this here, Fiennes Court, is named after Ralph Fiennes' family who lived there when I think his father was working in Ireland for a while or somewhere in Kilkenny, and Ralph Fiennes went to school in Kilkenny, and that's why this little street is called Fiennes Court. So we do have a Harry Potter connection in Kilkenny. And then this one, unfortunately, this big building, which was featured in a terrible movie called Lock Up Your Daughters, doesn't have the scraper anymore. So I couldn't map it. But then this is 12 William Street, and this should be 13. It is, yeah. And sometimes with the Georgian buildings, the door is in the center of the street fronting wall, and sometimes it's very close to the edge, like here. Just try to get them in the same distance because they are usually in the same distance. If it's entrance equals home, you see, then it's also a white symbol. These ones also didn't have boot scrapers, but while I was mapping the entrances, I just added those as well. And that's William Street done. And I can save that and just say snapped entrances to buildings. I don't really have to give a source, well, maybe a source survey or something. and upload. I'll have to go around, if I remember where I walked, and check all the other ones, but I don't want to bore you with all those little details. If I ran an overpass turbo query now, I'm just looking for nodes that have boot scraper in the key. And if I run this, and it's in Kilkenny, if I run this now, it gives me 31 locations. So there are 31 locations of boot scrapers, but that doesn't necessarily mean there are 31 boot scrapers, because some of them, as you saw earlier, have one left and one right, and some only have one. I did actually also map 2 where I could see traces of boot scrapers, so I used was boot scraper. So that should bring it up to 33, yeah. Can't tell you now which one it was. But I only did that in 2 locations because I thought that was really going too far to map all the ones that are actually gone. Where you can still see traces in the steps that there was something cast iron there, and by the distance between the 2 slots where they slotted the stands in, or wherever, the feet into the steps, you could still tell that it was the location of a boot scraper, but I think that's going too far, really. And I photographed a lot of them, and I'll show you with this example. This is the only one I've linked so far. I didn't use the key Wikimedia Commons because it's on the entrance, and then you would think that the image is of the entrance, but it's actually only of the boot scraper. So what I did is I used boot scraper : and then Wikimedia Commons, and then how you regularly use Wikimedia Commons links. Just file : and then the file name. I'm going to have to do that for all the ones that I had photographed, but I've covered adding Wikimedia links in previous videos, so I don't have to do that again. And I'm sure I will link this search in the description if you're curious, because there might be more. If I come across any more, I might add them. I would presume that there are more outside of churches. I checked the Methodist church. It didn't have one at but it might have had in the past. And I checked the friary, and it also didn't have one. But I presume that a lot of churches that were built around that time would have had them, because you don't want people with mucky feet, especially in rural areas. You don't want people with mucky feet coming into the church with all the muck on their boots. I hope you found that interesting and or enlightening, and you shall hopefully see me again in another video soon, either an older one or a new one. Slán go fóill.